let's go. Let's do, and Brian is just clicking slides for me. Right, should we do smiley face, but you can hear me okay? Can you hear me, smiley face? Oh, very good. Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. Right, I will talk for a bit. Hopefully there'll be questions. And let me just firstly introduce who I am, if I can get the slide thing working. So my name is Ben Reeves. I'm the Chief Executive of an organisation called the AAGE, the Australian Association of Graduate Employers. My email is there. Feel free to email me any questions you like. I have a little reminder to myself, just as Bryony said, we will make these slides available, so don't worry about scribbling down everything you see. I'll send them to Bryony, she'll forward them to you. In terms of the AAG and what we do, we're a professional association, so very similar to CEAV. We're not-for-profit, we exist to help people, we exist to help our members. One slight difference is that we're national, so we're a single body covering the whole country. And we have about 320 member organisations. If I go to the next slide, here's a breakdown of who those organisations are. So most of our members are employers, so 215 employers. What they all have in common is that they recruit graduates straight out of university. So they all have graduate programs and they're hiring maybe 5, maybe 50, maybe 500 graduates a year, year in, year out. The second bullet point, service providers are various organisations that provide services to the employers. So service providers might be organisations that provide aptitude testing, video interviewing, they might build websites, they might make videos, they might be a job board. So it's a sort of variety of organisations that provide services to the industry. Third bullet point, 40 universities are members, so that's just about every university in the country is a member. And the people we deal with at universities are their careers advisors. So there's a whole bunch of careers advisors at universities counselling university students on career paths, and all those people are members of the AG as well. And then the fourth bullet point, the professional associations, there are a range of bodies that promote particular career paths. So examples of these associations would be bodies like Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, Engineers Australia, and so on. So various bodies that promote particular career paths. How's that so far? Any questions? There was silence. Next slide is some examples of some of our members. So these are the various employer members. I've given you some of the well-known names. So our membership, 215 employers. Generally speaking, it's the bigger end of town. So it's the larger organisations that have a reasonable size of graduate intake each year. So I've rattled off a few names, which presumably you'll know most of those brands. So we have a mix of private and public sector employers as members. So first 4 bullet points are various sort of private sector organisations that recruit grads, and then towards the bottom, the Australian government, the federal government, we have a whole range of departments that recruit graduates every year. So departments like the ATO, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Defence, Foreign Affairs, immigration, human services, and so on and so forth. There is about, I think, 30 or 40 different government departments that recruit graduates every year. So they're fairly sizable recruiters. And then last bullet point is state government. So Victorian government, New South Wales government, WA, and so on, all have their own graduate programs. So in terms of pathways for students, we can I think potentially point people in a variety of different directions. So that's a sort of summary of some of the members. There are obviously way more than those shown on that slide, but that gives you a sense of who we represent. So these are the various organisations that are AG members, and these are the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Any questions? There was silence. Let's keep going. In terms of recruitment programs, I've got 3 bullet points here. Just about all our members have a graduate program, so that's the first bullet point. So that's recruiting graduates straight out of university into some kind of formal program. Second bullet point down, I'd say about half our members have some form of intern program or vacation work program, which is taking a student when they're in the middle of their degree to come in and do some work experience. So typically an intern would spend a summer, their summer vacation working for one of our members. They get paid for it, so they might spend 6, 8, 10 weeks working as part of an intern program, or it's sometimes called a vacation program, or a clerkship. It comes under a variety of different descriptions. And the third bullet point, and the reason I'm here, is that there are increasing numbers of AG members who are starting to do stuff with schools. And the various programs are called different names. Sometimes they're called cadet programs, sometimes they're called trainee programs, sometimes school leaver programs. And these are fashioned in a way whereby the employer is targeting perhaps a Year 12 student or perhaps a first-year university student in an effort to try and form a link with them early on in their university degree. It might be they're sponsored through university, it might be they're doing work experience throughout their degree course, but the idea is to have an early contact and early relationship such that when that student eventually graduates, they will join that particular employer. So this is one of the trends we're noticing, is that we've got more and more employers interested in school leavers, interested in promoting themselves to schools, and this is why I'm here today, or certainly my interest. So while we're here today, I've got lots of members who want to know more about schools. So I called up CAV and said, I'm interested in talking to your members. And they said, well, you can't talk to them until you write an article. So I had to write an article in your most recent newsletter. And then they said, okay, you can do a webinar, which is what we're doing today. So I've come along to try and tell you a bit about what we do. And hopefully help each other out. So I'm going to show you some slides now, some facts and figures, which may help you, and then I'm curious to see whether you want more of that or how else we can help you in terms of you counselling your respective students. I'll pause and ask for questions. There was silence. We'll move on. Right, I'll show you some data. So, common first jobs. So we do a survey of final year university students who've been offered a permanent job on graduation. We do this survey every year, and here is a slide summarising what type of job they're going to be doing. And you can see far away the most popular job is accounting. So there are many, many accounting firms that recruit students into accounting roles. There's quite a lot of consulting firms, IT, and so on and so forth. So this is a percentage of responses. The number of responses was, I'm trying to think now, it's usually somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 students. So this is 2,000 and 3,000 final year students who've been offered a job. We survey them and we ask them what type of job are you going to be doing. We give them a big list to choose from, and they select the options that you can see. So these are the most common ones. Here we go, first hand. Is this Brian asking a question?
Yes, it is, Ben. Just a quick question. Do you find that data, for example, obviously accounting is the most popular when this survey was done, do you find that data changes significantly during different times of different industry employments?
Yes, it does, obviously, with the economy. So recent years we've had, say during the mining boom, mining engineering roles, geology roles, far more prevalent and higher up this table. Around about .com boom time, turn of the century, a lot of IT type roles. So yes, it does vary. Depends a lot on the state of the economy and what sector is booming and which sector is contracting. But it gives you an overall sense of the types of jobs that are available. Any other questions? I can see education is fairly low down on the chart, sadly. There are lots of different things, but this gives you a sense of where there are volume vacancies. Trish, are you speaking or typing?
No, I'm going to speak. I was just wondering about health.
Health?
Yeah, because we've often been told that there are an increasing number of jobs in the health area, and yet I don't really see it.
Good question. And we don't have many members in the health sector. Is the answer to that. So we don't get very much data on it. But I would, from what I've heard, there are lots of roles in health, and if you add together all the doctors and nurses and physios and radiographers and everything else, yes, there are lots of jobs in those sectors, but not picked up in our particular survey, and that's I suppose a result of the employers we are surveying. We don't have many in the health sector. Any more questions? So we go next slide. typical starting salaries for these graduates. So these are starting salaries leaving university. Now, this data we collect from employers. So we ask employers, what is your starting salary? We give them various bands to choose from. So of all the employers that respond to our survey, this is a summary of the responses. So you can see at the top, more than 10% of employers have a starting salary for new graduates of 70,000 or more. The median figure, the middle figure written on the right, 57,100. So that's the right in the middle average figure, if you like, typical starting salary for a new graduate, and then various other numbers. So that kind of gives you a sense of how much graduates get paid in their first job. All these figures exclude superannuation. So you could add on another 9.5% at the moment to get a superannuation inclusive figure. So from memory, the median figure is just above the HECS repayment rate. So a typical grad on graduation in their first job starts paying back their HECS debt straight away. The next slide I think you'll be interested in. So this is similar data but broken down by job type. So what's the typical starting salary for different types of jobs, ranked from the most to the least. And again, this is dependent on who responds. So we get investment banks respond to our survey. So graduates starting investment banking can earn 100,000 straight out of university, no experience, straight into a job earning that amount, which makes you start thinking about changing career. And you can see mining and geology fairly high up, and finance and various other things. So this might give you a bit of a sense of how different the salaries can be. And a lot of this depends on market forces, how difficult it is to get people with particular skills, and of course how hard they work. Some of these roles, you might work 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week. Right, I've got to ask if there's any questions about this slide.
I just added a comment down the bottom, Ben, just saying that investment banking starting salary is pretty astronomical.
It is, and again, that's excluding superannuation, and they may get bonus on top of that. So I mean, this is just salary, base salary, but they work very hard. People in investment banking could work 6-7 days a week. They might do 12-hour days.
I think this slide is very important for all career practitioners, especially in the school field, to have an understanding of what their students may be looking at, because I know that is a question that some students are very keen to have answered, what their first year starting salary may look like after university.
Yeah, so it does vary a lot, but as we saw on the previous slide, it's typically 50-something thousand or thereabouts, if you're talking about on average. So that's salaries. Now, next section is on volume of applications. So this is how competitive it is. So we survey our employer members every year, and we ask them how many applications they receive in total for their graduate vacancies. So the median figure, the middle figure, is 1,450 applications. At the top of the page, 17% of our employers receive more than 4,000 applications every year. Some getting between 2,000 and 4,000, so 18%. Most popular response one in the middle, 26% of our employers get somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 applications, and so on. So this is a survey of employers. We ask them how many applications they receive in total, and this is a summary of the responses. And I think you'll agree, it's a lot of applications to receive and go through and try and work out who you want to hire. And for the recruiters, it's a lot of work. Annette, go ahead. Talking or typing? Annette's got her hand up. Is that typing?
I think Annette is typing, Ben. She's got the little typing logo next to her name.
And where's it going to appear? At the bottom?
That's correct. It should appear down the bottom left-hand side, Ben.
Not seeing anything. Annette, are you still typing?
Why don't you continue on, Ben, and then Annette's question will, oh, there we go. Roger might have a question.
Go, Roger, if you're talking. Or not? Shall I keep going?
Yes, Ben. I think
right.
if you have a question that's just a typing question, you can pop that in the chat box at any time, and I'll make sure that Ben sees those. Otherwise, if you do have a question and want to use your microphone, please, as we saw before, hit the raise the hand button. If you're having problems with your microphone, you can go up the top under Tools. You'll see there's an audio setup wizard, which may help you if you're struggling with your audio. I'll hand it back to Ben now.
Right, let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows the number of applications divided by the number of vacancies. So this gives you an indication of how competitive it is.
Hello?
Hello, someone's talking.
Oh,
Hello.
Finally I've worked out how to do it. With those figures of number of applications, has that grown over the last few years?
Yes, it has.
The numbers applying?
Yeah, the last couple of years, certainly as the economy has slowed down, the mining boom stopped, yes, bigger numbers of applications. And also there's more students coming out of university.
Right. So is that affecting the system overall in general, making it more competitive?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yes.
Right.
It's getting tougher. If you're a student coming out of university now, yes, there are more and more people you've got to compete with. And depending on the sector, there may be fewer jobs than there was a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
If we go to the next slide, it gives you an idea of just how competitive it is. So this slide, which says chart 5.3, number of applications per vacancy. So this is the total number of applications received divided by how many job vacancies there are for graduates. And the median figure on the right-hand side is 47. So if you like, the figure in the middle of all the responses is 47, which means, on average, 47 university graduates applying for each single job. 47 people for applying for each job, on average. So the employer will hire one of those 47, and then the other 46 will be rejected. So that's the median figure, but as you can see from the chart, some employers get less than 47 per vacancy, and some get more. And in some cases, if you look at the top of the chart, we have 13% of our members get more than 150 applications per vacancy. So a single job, and you've got 150 people applying for that single job. So yes, if you're a student applying for a popular role, you are competing against a lot of other people. And if you're a recruiter dealing with all these applications, you have a pretty hideous task of filtering down 100, 150 applications down to a manageable number of people you might want to interview. I'll pause at that point as we all think how lucky we are to have a job.
I think we're all very lucky to have a job, Ben. I just want to check, because I know Roger had his... Hello, Roger?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Do you have a question for Ben?
Yeah, look, I'm interested in knowing what sort of factors is it that sort out the good candidates from the less good candidates?
Right.
We say.
Right. Well, Roger, good question. I'll come to that, back to that a bit later on.
Thanks very much.
I'm gonna look at what employers screen and look for. Coming soon, promise. Now, don't know whether this will work. This is where we're going to challenge the technology. Now, I've got statistics on the number of students commencing and completing different degree subjects. Now, I've got a chart. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. But just to give you some backgrounds, if you're unaware of this, the Australian government collects statistics from all universities every year. And they collect the number of students starting or commencing degrees, and they also collect the number of statistics on how many students finish degrees. They do that across all subjects and across all Australian universities. It's a mammoth exercise, and the really useful thing is that you can buy the data from the government. So what we do every year is we buy the data, and we distribute it to our members, and it gives our members a sense of how many students are there starting a degree in maybe teacher education, or how many finishing a degree in teaching education, or how many students starting a geology degree, how many finishing a geology degree, and so on. So that's what I've got. Hopefully to show you this particular slide, we've got 2 hyperlinks in it. And the big test of the technology now is whether we can get the hyperlinks to work to show you the charts. If this doesn't work, remember, I'm going to send you the slides. So once we send you the slides, you can always click on these things. Bryony, go ahead.
I just want to mention to everyone in the room, Ben and I have tested this afternoon. If you don't have Adobe Flash updated on your system, this won't work. If you do, you should see a little graph come up. If you don't, you'll just see a blank page. I do apologise for that. However, as I said, I will be sending through the PowerPoints on Thursday. So if it doesn't work on the computer you're currently on, hopefully you'll be able to view it on a separate computer at a later date.
Right. So this is the moment of truth, Brian, isn't it, for me, to see if I can get this to work.
Fingers crossed, Ben.
Let's just see whether the coaching worked this afternoon. Right, so I've got to do that. I've got to do that. You've got to talk. I'm talking you through it now. It's like help desk. Right, then I go in there. I hit return. It has a think. It's loading. Right, it's on my screen. Now, how do we test? Do we get people to do a poll, maybe?
Absolutely. Why don't we get everybody to give a smiley face if you can see the graph?
It's coloured balls. It's a chart with lots of coloured balls on it.
We're getting a few. Jenny, Judy, Mitch.
Not many.
Alison. We've got a few up there who say Grace, Francis.
Not that many. Or it's still loading. Not a huge amount. Right. I won't spend too long on this. This is the best thing in the whole presentation, and most of you can't see it. So I'm going to try and describe it just briefly. This is a chart. It's got about 70 coloured balls on it. Each ball represents a different degree subject. So there's a coloured ball for accounting, another one for law, another one for civil engineering, and so on and so forth. The bigger the ball, the more students there are. And the position of the chart on the screen tells you the percentage of students that are female studying that subject and the percentage of students that are international students studying that subject. And the whole chart moves. So some of you who can see it, bottom left-hand corner there's a little triangle, a little black triangle. Click the black triangle and the chart might move for you. And it is showing the number of students studying each degree subject and how those numbers change over time. It's really groovy when it works. It's a Google motion chart. It's free software, and what we're going to do is send you the hyperlink to that, and hopefully you can gain access to it. And why this is useful is it might give you all a sense of how many students study each type of degree at university. So whether the numbers studying that subject are big or medium or small, and whether there's a gender difference. So for some subjects, the gender split is sort of 50-50. For some subjects, it's mainly male students. So a lot of the engineering IT subjects, it's mainly male students. For the other extreme, teacher education, nursing, highly female subjects. So I'll stop there, but that is what the chart shows. It'll be in the PowerPoint slides, which we'll send you. And you may all find this quite useful because it gives you a sense of just how popular different subjects are. Right, I'm going back to the slides. Hopefully they're reappearing. So I had two charts. One shows you commencement, so how many students commencing degree subjects from 2009 to 2013. And the second chart would show you completion, so how many students finishing an undergraduate degree over 5 years, broken down by each degree subject. Right. Those who could see it, did it work? Did you like it?
Ben, if you look in the chat down the bottom, you'll see that Deb has said, absolutely, it's brilliant.
Deb thinks it's brilliant.
And Nicole looked good.
Right, Deb says it's brilliant. Okay, everybody, so it's brilliant. For those who couldn't see it, have a look at it when the slides come around. Right, so stats on how many students there are. In-demand characteristics. So this particular chart, we survey all our employer members. We give them a list of characteristics, and we ask them to identify when they're recruiting graduates out of university, whether each characteristic is very important or quite important or not very important or not assessed at all. And we end up with this table we're looking at, and we've ordered it by very important. So towards the top are all the characteristics that, generally speaking, our members are looking for. So that's from cultural fit, teamwork, interpersonal skills, and so on and so forth. So the stuff towards the top is generally what employers are looking for when they're recruiting graduates, which was the question a bit earlier on. One thing I'll draw your attention to, if you look at the table, about 2/3 of the way down, there's a heading that says university grade. So that's exam results at university, which you can see is very important only to 21% of our employers. It's pretty low down. So the majority of our employers are actually looking at a whole bunch of other things and not really too interested in university grades. They look for other stuff like integrity and oral communication skills and teamwork and so on and so forth. Right, question. Who's going first, Alison? Talking or typing?
I think Alison may be typing. Oh no, here she is.
Go.
Explain cultural fit.
Cultural fit. I'm getting an echo as well. Cultural fit. If I spoke about one of our members I can think of is Brisbane City Council. So they're recruiting people to work for the council. And the kind of culture they have there is one of they want people who are interested in serving the community. So from a cultural perspective, the people they're looking for have that kind of mindset. If that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So they have some criteria. They have set criteria for their cultural fit.
Yes.
They're not generic.
No, correct. And therefore the culture will vary from organisation to organisation.
Yes, yes.
If I can just get you both to pause for a minute. Alison, if you could do me a favour, when you're not talking, can you make sure you turn your microphone off? Because we are getting quite a bit of feedback at the moment.
Done it? Yes.
Alison, if you can unclick your talk button, that'd be great.
Probably
That's better. There we go. We just couldn't quite hear your answer, Ben.
All right. So cultural fit, if I was describing Brisbane City Council, so what they look for in terms of recruiting graduates is people who have a focus on serving the community. That's the most important thing. Whereas in another type of organisation, maybe going back to investment banks, they're likely to look for people who are very driven, very motivated by money, making profits, being entrepreneurial, that kind of stuff. So their culture is very different, might be more of an aggressive culture. Another employer we have might be Apple Retail. You'll be familiar with the Apple stores. So they have a graduate program where they're recruiting people to manage those stores. And if you've ever been into an Apple store, you get a different kind of culture where they're almost evangelical about the product and trying to help you and being really keen about it. So it's that kind of thing. It's a bit difficult to describe, but it's the fact that each type of organisation has its own culture. And what the employers are trying to do is recruit people that will fit into that culture, have the right kind of values and outlook, if that makes sense. Where are we going next? Is it Trish?
I think it's on to Trish now.
Thanks, Ben. That was a good description of the cultural fit, and I had an idea about what it meant. One thing that has me intrigued, though, is the motivational fit.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of that competency being assessed before, so a brief description would be terrific. Thanks.
So I think this is a bit tricky to describe, but it's the idea of whether people are self-motivated enough. So if you set them goals and targets, that they go out and seek to achieve them, and seek to potentially reach goals, maybe make sales targets. It might be get a certain rating if they're dealing with customers, or maybe they've got to attend a certain number of courses. It might be they need to get they're looking to get promoted. It's that kind of stuff. So there are, and with all these different things listed in this table, there are tests and assessments that the employers use to determine whether the candidate has got that particular criteria. So motivational fit is just looking at the candidate's motivation, whether that fits in with the organisation.
Excellent. I think Judy is next. Now, Judy has actually written her question down the bottom on the left-hand side. Are they asked which university matters?
This is the employers. I would say most employers don't care what university you're from. So in terms of most of our members, they will receive applications from all over the country. I suppose if the employer was based in Melbourne, for example, then I think you'd expect probably the majority of candidates would be applying from the Melbourne area or from Victoria, but you certainly would get applications from Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia, Tasmania. So applications come in typically from all around the country and from all different types of universities, and I think the typical member doesn't really care what university you've been to. They're more interested in assessing these criteria and seeing whether you fit in, and the university you've gone to really is, I'd say, almost irrelevant. I think that's a good answer.
I think that's a brilliant answer, Ben. And on to Roger.
Yeah, look, I keep hearing about how important IT skills are in all of this, yet it's at the bottom of the list. Can you make a comment on that?
I find that quite interesting too. And I think, generally speaking, I would say there's an assumption that people have got IT skills already, and they're not generally assessed. So people, I think our employers assume that you're reasonably competent at using whatever it is, email, Excel, PowerPoint, so on and so forth. And generally that's okay. The one exception to that would be when the role is an IT role.
Right.
That, of course, is very different. So, and I would say at the moment, probably that the one role, if I was going to mention any role that's in most demand, would be an IT role. If there's one place where there's shortages at the moment, it's programmers would be probably the big shortage at the moment.
Right, so it's higher level technical skills that are required rather than the generic skills the software skills.
Yes, correct. So I think typical employers not too fast. They'll assume that people can use Word and Excel and PowerPoint, that kind of stuff. That's pretty much a given, I think, for this current generation.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think to follow on with that, Ben, as well, in today's market, a lot of employers would be assuming that graduates would have these skills. And it is often seen that although a majority of jobs in this day and age do require the use of technology, it's just seen as a given, and some employers may forget, in a sense, that that is a role that's important, and because they just presume that the graduates are going to have it, they're actually not including it in this process.
Yep. Well, I think from a typical recruiter I deal with, I think they're all typically scared of how IT savvy the typical graduate is nowadays.
Absolutely, and I'm sure all of our members on here can very much attest to how tech savvy all of our students are in this day and age. It's quite scary.
Yeah, it is. Right, anything else on this particular chart?
I think that's all of the questions at the moment. If we want to maybe continue on, we can always come back. If anybody has any more questions regarding this chart, which is on page 26, we are more than happy to come back at the end of the presentation.
Right. Next up, we're going to have a little look at assessment methods used. So this chart, again, is a survey of our employer members. We give them a list of assessment methods, and we ask them to identify which ones they use. So the most popular, the one at the top, behavioural-based interviews, is used by 88% of our members, and then panel interviews, 79%, and so on and so forth. So it gives you a sense of the different types of things university students have to go through in order to get a job. If I was going to explain, do I need to explain what these terms mean? I probably do. Behavioural-based interviews. So this is typically an interview between the candidate and an interviewer, and the interviewer is asking questions along the lines of give me an example of a time when you displayed leadership, or talk about a time when you worked in a team, or talk about a time when you solved a problem. So the phrasing of the question is usually around a particular competency, and it's asking the candidate to talk about a time when they demonstrated that particular competency. So that's a behavioural-based interview. It's trying to assess individual behaviours, and obviously it varies from employer to employer as to what the behaviours are. So that's the first one. A panel interview is where the candidate is faced with a panel of interviewers. So that may be 3, 4, 5 people, all firing questions at you, and that's pretty common within the Australian government. That's quite often how they interview people. Aptitude testing, you might be familiar with. So this is it might be a maths test, so multiple choice test. Might be a series of mathematical numeracy type questions. It might be questions on verbal reasoning, but equally it could be questions around integrity, could be questions around a whole range of other things. There are loads and loads of tests. There's hundreds of tests in the marketplace at the moment. They assess all types of different things, and they are online. So typically nowadays the students are doing the tests at home in their own time, unsupervised, typically against the clock. So it might be they've got to do 30 questions in 30 minutes, something like that. So that's quite common. Reference checks will be checking whether somebody has actually done the degree they've said they've done, or they've attended the universities that they said they're attending, that kind of stuff. So I go one more, group exercises or group interviews. This is where you get a group of candidates, you put them in a room and you give them a scenario, and they will talk or argue amongst themselves. So it might be you give them a scenario where they're shipwrecked on an island and they've got to decide amongst themselves what they're going to do, that type of thing. I could keep talking, but I'll pause and see if people have got any questions. Bryony, straight away.
Just a quick one. I know it's something that does tend to come up when talking about the techniques used by recruiters. Do you find that many recruiters are investigating social media pages?
Not officially. Employers don't own up to it, so it's not something they advertise. I would say in some cases they may sort of Google search the candidate and see if they can find reference to them on somewhere like Facebook. So one of the things I would advise students is to make sure the privacy controls are on their Facebook page, or there's nothing too controversial on their Facebook page, that kind of stuff, particularly if they've got an unusual name.
I think that's very, very important, Ben.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're a John Smith, then there may be lots of John Smiths around the country. A bit hard for the recruiter to identify you, whether if you've got an unusual name.
But if you're a Bryony Penrose, there is one of me, and if an employer wants to
find you, yeah. So I think
exactly.
I would say it does go on with some employers, but it's not something they ever talk about, not publicly.
So it's something though we should be advising our students to be very aware of.
Yes, definitely. And also, whilst we're on that topic, I'd advise your students, if they've got an email address, maybe to get a separate one for jobs. So I don't know, you get people that their email address is hotguy@gmail or something like that. And I would advise them not to use an email address like that if they're applying for jobs, which of course you all know that's. But you'd be surprised how many applications you receive with funny email addresses, which doesn't look very professional. So I'd suggest to students maybe they create another email address that sounds a bit more.
I'm very glad you mentioned that, Ben, because I think that's certainly an issue that many teachers would come up against this day and age, is unfortunate email addresses that maybe aren't appropriate for employment.
We get that. That's quite common. Yeah. Any other questions about the list of selection techniques? All right. I'll move on to the next slide, which just summarizes how many techniques are used on average. So we asked the employers how many of these different hurdles the students have to get over. Median is 8. So that's 8 different things the university student has to do in order to secure a job. You'll see from the chart, there are some employers at the top who use more than 12 steps as part of their selection process. There are also equally some towards the bottom that are doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So the the tradition of maybe doing one interview and getting the job, or maybe two interviews and getting a job, that's largely gone, and that's being replaced by a whole series of steps. And if I go back to the preceding slide, nowadays you'd be doing, as a student, probably doing an online application. You then might be doing some online aptitude tests. You might be doing a video interview. You might then be doing an assessment center. You go into the employer with a whole bunch of other candidates. You might be delivering a presentation. You could be presenting to senior management in order to get a job. There's usually quite a lot of hurdles, and then even once they've finished interviewing you, they then do reference checks and background checks and medicals and that kind of stuff as well. So it's really quite involved nowadays. It's almost a full-time job applying for jobs. So on average, about 8 steps. Now, next. I'm just going to refer to this. So we won't try and look at it because YouTube will be blocked. A lot of our members, a lot of AG members, have recruitment videos. So these are promotional videos targeted at students. And what we've done is we've put them all in the same place, all on a single YouTube channel. And what we're looking at here is the hyperlink to see that channel. So that might be a useful resource for you in terms of if you've got students who like watching videos, probably music videos all the time. Well, if they like YouTube, this is the channel that's actually devoted to careers. And there are I think it's about 30 or 40 different employers on there. Some of them have multiple videos. So don't worry about writing down the hideously long hyperlink address. We're going to send you the slides a bit later this week, and then you'll have the hyperlink buried in the slides, and you can use that and show it to your students if that's helpful. And their parents. Next, it's question time, or comments, because we're getting near the end.
So we're going to open the floor to anyone who has any questions. It doesn't have to be on one of the recent slides. You could be wanting to refer back to an earlier slide, or have a general question for Ben. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, feel free to write your question in the chat box. There we go, Roger.
Roger.
Yeah, look, I just want to say thank you for this. It's been eye-opening and confirmed some things, and dispelled some other things for me. So just thanks for doing it.
All right. Thanks very much. Oh, this is just the start, Roger.
Yeah, okay.
This is just the this is just the start. So this is just to give you a sort of background. What I've done today is just showing you a few things. We have lots more than this, and one of the questions we wanted to ask was, what more could we do? So, for example, you've got a conference coming up later this year, so CAV have asked us to come and present. If we came to present, what would be useful to come and talk about? And Roger, you don't have to answer that. That's the question.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Somebody else answer that.
Not specifically Roger, but anybody else.
And if anybody has any ideas or suggestions for Ben, feel free to email myself. I'll put my email in the chat box down the bottom, and I'm more than happy to pass any suggestions or questions that you might have later on over to Ben. I think I do have one question, Ben. If we just went back, you don't need to actually go back, but to the slide about the different interview techniques. I know myself, I've experienced a number of different interview techniques, and one that seems to be very prevalent in this day and age is the Skype interview.
Ah, right. Or video interviewing. So there's two strands to this. One is a two-way process. So the candidate and the interviewer are online at the same time, and they can see each other and they're talking to each other. And that is often used where the candidate and the recruiter are not in the same city. So the recruiter might be in Melbourne and the candidate might be in Perth. And rather than one or other flying to meet, it's easy to do a Skype interview. So we've had that kind of thing for the last few years as a means of avoiding flying somewhere just for an hour-long interview. So that's the two-way process. The really topical thing at the moment is video interviewing, which is a one-way process, and that is where the candidate is online being recorded, and that's video recorded, answering questions that appear on their screen. So your student might be at home, they're looking at their laptop, they log into a website to start a video interview, their camera comes on, and up on the screen suddenly appears a question which might be, why do you want to work at company name? And the student has to provide an answer to that question on the spot. They only get one take. So they may have 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds to respond to that question, and it's being recorded all the time. And then another question will appear on the screen, which the student doesn't know what it is. The question appears, again, they get maybe 30 or 60 questions to provide an answer. And that particular technique is being used by more and more of our members, and is probably highly topical. And this is one of the things we might be able to show you if we come and speak at the conference. We might perhaps be able to demonstrate to you how it works.
Yes, that last one, I've certainly experienced the two-way Skype, but I've never experienced that last one, and I think it would certainly be daunting for a lot of students. I know Annette's got her hand up, and I'll get to you in a second, Annette, but Jenny has written a question, are there any particular careers where there are so many graduates that it will be almost impossible to gain employment in that field?
Not about impossible, but difficult. Law would be one, is an obvious one at the moment. So there's been a huge expansion of the number of universities offering law courses. To the extent now where there are way too many people graduating with a law degree, and there's sort of varying estimates as to what proportion will ever actually work in the law. Might be 50% or less will actually work in the legal profession, and that seems to be the trend at the moment. So there are, as you're aware, there aren't caps anymore for universities in terms of how many students they can enrol. So that for some subjects has led to an enormous growth in the number of people studying certain subjects. To the extent where they may not necessarily end up in the career they think they're going to.
Okay, there's a couple of other questions in the chat, but we'll just go to Annette.
Okay, I'd like to thank you as well. It's very informative. You mentioned earlier about companies wanting to approach schools more to offer students cadetships and things like this.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what they're interested in doing and how we can work together to offer these opportunities to students?
Right, a variety of things. So in some cases it's offering the ability to be sponsored through university. So it's studying and working at the same time and having a relationship with an employer all the way through university. So there are employers that offer that, and so if you've got a student who really knows what they want to do, this is a particularly good way of getting into a particular career. So thinking off the top of my head, there are some accounting firms that offer these kinds of programs. I know the Defence Force does. So if you've got a student who definitely wants to be an accountant, or they definitely want to work in the Army or something like that, then there are programs available whereby you can be supported all the way through university. And during your vacations, you're probably going to work for the employer and get paid at the same time. And it may be they're going to pay for some or all of your degree. So there's that kind of stuff, a sort of a work and study relationship all the way through university. There are some organizations that just offer scholarships. So they're looking for a particular type of student, and they will just hand over a certain amount of money, which might be $5,000, might be $10,000 to help support that student through university. So sometimes there's scholarships. Sometimes there are employers who are trying to persuade people to choose a particular path. That might be, let's say we'll go back to IT. Google's a good example. Google does a lot of stuff with schools, and what they're trying to do is persuade young people to become programmers, particularly women. So they do a lot of work with high schools to try and persuade young women to think about programming, think about learning coding, and there might be a career path, and therefore you should perhaps study IT technology at university. So there might be that kind of stuff. There may be organizations, again, thinking about getting people to follow a career path, maybe into engineering or maybe into science. So there's that kind of stuff. And not necessarily everybody's doing it, but what I'm seeing is more and more employers thinking along those lines, that they can't find the right kind of people leaving university, so let's try and influence the pipeline by getting more people to study a particular subject in the first place. Right, where are we going?
Excellent. We've got a couple of questions in the chat box, about 3 or 4. So I'm going to start with Roger. How useful are university career services? How can they help?
How useful from what perspective? So they're doing the same kind of job that you guys are. So they are counselling university students about careers, and it depends on the university as to how well resourced they are. So some of the universities I talk to may have 20, 30, 40,000 students, and the career service might be 5 people looking after that volume of students. So I don't know if that's Roger, is it that type of answer to the question? The career services themselves will have links with employers, and they're obviously trying to counsel students about which employers to apply to and where there are jobs.
I think I think that was what Roger was meaning. If you have any more questions with that, Roger, feel free to email me and I'm happy to pass it on to Ben. Just moving along. Yes, Lynn, is there a breakdown between people who get grad positions and those who don't get grad
positions? No, not at the moment. There's a government-funded research every year where they try and survey, they do a census of all the university students as they leave university. One of the questions asked is whether they have a job or not. So there are statistics on what percentage of students have got a job when they leave university, but not a breakdown as to what type of job it is. So are they working in a fast food restaurant, or are they on a graduate program with PricewaterhouseCoopers? That type of data doesn't exist at the moment. So all we have is just raw employment percentages, but not what they're doing. But that's likely to change in the next year or so. So the government's funding a change to that survey, and the intention is to get better data and to measure when graduates leave university, well, how many of them are actually doing a job that they've been trained for. So that's coming soon, but it doesn't exist at the moment. Where are we going next? Sue?
Yes, Sue, I think you might have partially just answered that.
It's in that one. Generally, it's by employers. It's possible to break it down, depends on what you're looking for. Sue, and you can always email if there's something specific you're looking for, then just send me an email and I'll tell you whether or not it exists.
Okay, and finally, Sue, these types of places are getting very few and far between these days. I think she might be referring to a specific topic that we were talking about earlier. The big 4 accounting firms used to all offer these, and now only one does. Very dependent on the economy, it seems. Maybe there is more opportunity for summer placements for first-year students.
Yes, that's true. I agree. Can't fault Sue on that. Spot on.
Okay, so does anybody else have any last questions for Ben?
I might pose one whilst people think about it. In Sydney this Friday, we're doing a face-to-face event with the equivalent to CAV in New South Wales, which is the CAA. So we've got an event which is a face-to-face meeting between careers advisors, high school careers advisors from New South Wales, meeting with AAG members. So they're actually meeting with recruiters from a whole bunch of employers. So they're spending, I think it's 4 or 5 hours together, face-to-face, talking about the kinds of things we're talking about, but giving people the opportunity to get into quite a lot of detail. So my question is whether something like that might be of interest to CAV members, actually meeting with employers.
I think you're going to get a definite answer of absolutely yes, Ben.
Do we give smiley faces, if that sounds interesting? We're getting a few of those. Right, and Melinda's hand is up. Or not? Is Melinda still there?
I think she might have just been agreeing with you, Ben.
All right, rather than putting her hand up. Right, so that might be something I'll talk to CAV about doing. Now, where are we up to, time-wise?
Just got a last couple of minutes.
Got anything else? Oh, Melinda was applauding. Isn't there a button for that?
Under the smiley face buttons, it's the 3rd button down for applause.
Right, any more questions? Oh, people, is that a symbol of applauding? It is. All right. Oh, thanks so much. People are applauding. I feel very humble. Right. So, shall we wrap up there? So, slides. The slides we've been looking at, we will send to you. The plan is for us to present at the CAV conference, which I think is December, so we'll do that. And we may talk to CAV about maybe doing an event where you can meet employers face-to-face later in the year. On the screen is my name and my email address. If you've got any further questions, just send me an email. Thanks very much for listening.
Excellent. I think I'd like to invite everyone to give Ben a big round of applause. I think everyone would agree with me that that was a fantastic presentation. Quickly, Ben, before you go, I know Roger's just giving you a round of applause. No, that's all right. Excellent. I've put Ben's email address in the chat box down the bottom if you want to copy that and send Ben an email. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to email myself as well, and I will pass any questions on to Ben. I'm going to put in the chat box down the bottom the web link to the online survey. We'd love to hear your feedback as to what you thought of today's session, and obviously any feedback we'll also pass on to Ben. Once again, big round of applause and thank you to Ben for today. Just a reminder that our next webinar is actually on this Thursday. Now, the bookings have closed for that, but if you have missed out, feel free to email me and I'm sure I can send you the link. So that's Keeping Out of Court Series 2, Online Technologies. And then the following week, the 17th of June, we have Unpacking Work Studies, Year 9 to 10 ACARA curriculum. And that will be conducted by Bernadette Gigliotti, CEAV's CEO. Once again, thank you very much for attending today. I'm going to put the timer on for 1 minute, and after 1 minute I will be closing the room. We wish you all a very good night and thank you.